Welcome to the Trending XR podcast, where we discuss the latest in augmented reality, virtual reality, and AI with industry leaders who are shaping the future of how we will work, socialize, and go about our daily lives in the third dimension. In the not-so-distant future, we won't even be using phones. We'll be using these. I know, sounds crazy, but we have never been closer to this future concept becoming our current reality. I am so excited to share this new world with you. I hope to teach you, inspire you, and ignite your passion for extended reality. It's time to change dimensions. Are you coming? Welcome back to Episode 2 of Trending XR Podcast. Today's guest has spent the last 11 years working as a solutions consultant, developer advocate, and marketing professional in the computer vision and startup SaaS space. I'd like to welcome on Jonathan Stephans.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for coming on the podcast. Pretty excited to talk about what you got going on. Do you want to start with just telling us something about yourself professionally and personally?
Yeah, okay. I'll start professionally. A lot of people have no idea what I do for my job. I'm a chief evangelist. What does that? Sounds like a made up name. I do a lot of things. Working at a small computer vision company, that means you can wear like all the hats you need to in any given week. But really, like what I do is I help people kind of bridge technical gap of what's out there, what's possible, and what they do, and see if we can kind of like bring those together. How can we solve your problem? And I really dive into like solving industrial problems, not creative problems for movies or visual effects. So basically, I'm that guy that just kind of helps people learn and educate. If you know Guy Kawasaki, he's like the most famous chief evangelist for Apple, now Canva, and some other companies. And that's what I do every day. Is just always trying to teach and let people learn about this technology, as it's hitting us really fast and always changing. So yeah. And then personally, I don't know. I'm always busy. So while I've got a really busy job, I also got, multiple kids. I got probably as many animals. I have like 4 animals, 3 kids. And it's like, there's never a dull moment from wake up to go to bed. I'm working on something.
He is a hustler and a family man, folks. You heard it here. You can do both. So
yeah, I don't have a lot of like friends outside of work, but that's how, that's right at this point. When you have little kids, you don't get a lot of free time anyways.
Yes, understandable.
Yeah.
So like on the touching back on your job,
Okay.
so a chief evangelist for the company EveryPoint, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that is one, you do a lot of content. So he has an impressive amount of content on his space, and you're also someone that goes in and does boots on the ground. I think you've traveled quite a bit extensively around the U.S. For this job, working. Yeah. So and you're doing this. You're going to these companies around the U.S. or maybe internationally, and you're actually doing boots on the ground, like consulting, for what it is that EveryPoint does, right? Which is work in the visual space for visual data.
Yeah. So again, like being a small company, 1 second, I'm talking about all these animals. I got a cat on my desk. As so yeah, so when I started working for EveryPoint, I was almost 12 years ago. I was more on the consultative side. I did solutions consulting. And so what that meant was we have this portfolio of IP of, we know how to take imagery and turn it into 3D data and extract all sorts of information from that and solve sorts of problems. And so early on we had a product, but it wasn't really the finished product or the product that we're at today. So I would go and travel and onboard customers, meet potential customers, figure out like where our technology matches their needs. So what what we can do for them. And so I ended up traveling a lot. I've gone through like like different cycles of hype as well in this 12 years of the drones. There's one point I swear they thought drones would solve everyone's problems on the earth, which is not true. But again, like I was traveling and teaching people how to drone the commercial drone pilot test at the same time, trying to just figure out how we can capture images to solve a problem they want from a drone. Because prior to that, we had airplanes capturing the imagery, like
Right.
they would be a photographer doing loops when they're in the airplane and taking a photo out of the side of
Uh-huh.
their window. It was pretty impressive that they
That
can do.
and that was predominantly in the time prior to, 3D GS. This was all just photogrammetry
Yeah.
you guys are mostly working with?
Yep. And so we have um I got really good at explaining complex things to very non-technical people because our core customer are in more the industrial space. So think of quarrying and mining, things like that. And so
Sure.
when you're talking to that person, there was many a times where they had just you started using with an iPhone app. That's the first time they've actually not only used our iPhone app, but perhaps the first time they've had an iPhone
Technology.
or and
That's scary.
smartphone. So or like, let me tell you how to close and reopen the app if it has an issue. Like just talking people through things we take for granted today. And so I got this kind of knack for explaining technology really well to people. And so then when our company start out is this kind of like we have stockpile reports and SR measure. They're a way to go and measure a bump on the ground. I need to measure a giant pile of rock, a um get a volume so I can do my inventory for financials and operations. And then in 2000 when the iPhone 12 came out, we have built this big company over stockpile measurement and management, and we have this back end API that we want to be able to hook into eventually to build their own verticals. And so when that iPhone 12 came out, we're like, hey, this is a good time. People are learning about LiDAR and spatial capture maybe for the first time. This is a good time to say, let's make an impact with that. We opened up the API. So then my job again was like, okay, now we have educated all these people in industrial space on stockpiles. Let's just open the door and say, anyone who's got any idea, it could be anything, you can solve it if it's, we can measure and capture it with images. And so then I'm going online and traveling a little less, but maybe going more to conferences and explaining technology and saying what we can capture and solve that way. And so, I mean, we had ideas, ranging from, scanning potholes so they know how much to fill a pothole in. You could have people
Yeah.
community scanners and then report it to a government saying, hey, we have X amount of potholes and we need this much hot mix to patch it up, things like that. Or
That is
we
cool.
yeah, we actually there's a forensics app called Recon 3D that has been built off of EveryPoint, and they do way more now. But basically, first
Interesting.
responders can go to an accident and scan a scene with an iPhone or an iPad Pro and get really good data without having to wait for a professional crew with a LiDAR scanner to get in there. So we've just kind of opened up the door for all these different possibilities. And so again, I come in saying, okay, here's what we can do, get people to kind of dream. And then occasionally someone will reach out and say, hey, I had this idea, or hey, my client has this problem and I think you have the technology to solve it. I understand this domain. What can we build together to go solve
Yeah.
that problem? And we actually
Yes.
really we build together, but it's more of like, hey, here's our API. Go have fun with it. Go build it. I will, as a developer advocate as well. I help them kind of learn what they can do with this API.
Yeah, that's awesome. So several things there is like that's kind of like what I would love to do at some point here is to be able to go out and take something like this and build with
Mhm.
companies. Like look at your company. What do you need? How does it function? And start to apply different ways to use the technology to help them, scale or manage their company internally. It's really cool. But
Mhm.
with the app, for the forensics, it's really interesting where we start combining things where it's this you're democratizing the use of like LiDAR, right? With the new
Mhm.
like iPhones, and they have this empowered by stuff that you guys do. And then once we attach like AI to that, then you're having this like companion analyzing these things with you or for you and catching things that maybe you wouldn't have and opening up new neural pathways to like ideas of like maybe solving the crime in a different light, which is really
Mhm.
cool. I love that. That's
Yeah.
such an interesting way to use that.
And to touch on machine learning, so I again we ran for a while a podcast called the Computer Vision Decoded podcast, and in fact we rebooted it about 2 weeks ago. We're actually not only rebooted it, we're aiming for twice or 4 times a month, post every week on this because there's so much for us to cover because of machine learning. What's possible in computer vision and 3D reconstruction has
Mhm.
completely changed as machine learning has just kind of hockey sticked. And part
Yeah.
of that is like in the past, I want to make a 3D model of an asset. I need, let's say, X number of photos, and those photos can only be have a high level overlap, and there's all these constraints. So if you don't capture it right, you're out of luck. Now with machine learning, it's basically you can have a couple photos, and they could be like far apart, and it'll still base off of all this
Mm.
information that has been trained on this neural network say, okay, I know enough about this scene to know that this camera is here and this camera is here, and I can still make a 3D model. And it's just getting insane. So just what you're able to achieve is just incredible. And without having to be an expert then, right, Scott? You're basically saying you don't need to know anything about photogrammetry. You just go take some pictures, it'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think you just made a post about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like I like just made yeah, you like just made this post where I think you were saying it's not like finding that sweet spot of how many photos you need.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, yeah. So again, yeah. So all the things I do. So I post, for a company, but then I also have my own personal YouTube channel where I kind of explore, I'd say, the hobby side of stuff. I'm
mhm.
interested in this technology. We don't use it as a company, but I want to keep on top of it for me and for what we do. I'll jump in there and then create some sort of tutorial or break it down. So one was how many images you need to make the best 3D Gaussian splatting, because again, like, people don't know. And so they'll either take a handful of photos and they'll be saying, why does it not look very good? Or the opposite, I seem to keep crashing my computer. Well, okay. How many photos are you using? 6,000?
6,000.
You probably need more like 300. So, yes, but that content and education isn't even out there. So to go find it, you either have to explore yourself and play with the different projects, or um, try to connect with experts. Yes.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I so I think we had briefed this in a previous convo about like this your style of educating is really interesting.
Hmm.
It's common to find people who kind of partially educate or they very superficially educate someone on something, but you go really into the details and make sure that it's noted what people should have in terms of even like hardware or software updates. And it's like you need to start with this, and then you could do this, and then you could do this, and here's the multi-part video for that.
And I've
It's
heard.
cool, especially on like new stuff that not a lot of people are making content on.
Hmm. I've heard conflicting feedback on that.
Really?
Glad you like it.
No, I think
I
it's
think
great.
what frustrates people that are already in this space or have a good core understanding of how things work, or the base of knowledge, I think they get frustrated. So like, oh, Jonathan did a tutorial on 2D Gaussian splatting, or I try to think of one of these ones that are more nuanced. And
Mhm.
they'll realize they spend 15, 20 minutes talking about all the software you install just to then start downloading the software I'm gonna talk about. And they're like,
Oh,
"I
that's all
already
right.
did that, but I put chapters in YouTube," so it's like, "Hey, skip this part if you want." But I think some people really are just like, "Oh, okay, and you want it faster," but actually majority of people are happy because they're saying, I kept trying to try this software and running into problems, not even realizing there's all these things they need to do before they even use the software to get their computer set up to get this working.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I'd prefer the long form full explainer than than nobody making those, right?
Yeah.
Someone has to make it, and I'd rather like that person who's really like already pretty educated in the space have to like skip forward than like not have access, right?
As
So
opposed
I
to
think it's
she'll
great
figure
that
it out themselves.
yeah, and like you said, you add the chapters, which is kind of what I was gonna say next, and then at some point we'll have AI like get real powerful in like these in your interaction with content and be like, find me the part that says something about this specifically, and then it could kind of take you to it, and I think we'll get there at some point. But yeah, I think it's great. I'm gonna pull up your YouTube channel real quick.
And I use,
So
I
here's Pixel
I
Reconstruct.
yeah, I just came up with the name to beat not make sure it's not exactly every point, because every point is company I work for, do a lot of content for them as well. But I don't want people to think that we're a 3D Gaussian splatting and Nerf company, because while we look at the technology and we haven't quite implemented it in anything yet, because it's not quite where our customers are, the you know I wanted to have what I'm learning and out there, and people know, hey, they know I'm Jonathan. I don't hide the fact I work at every point. And in fact, if you want to, they'll find us And so that's great, but not confuse people about what we actually are producing as a product. Because they'll say, oh, wow, using Nerfs and Gaussian splatting. I'm like, we are playing with it, but again, like to deploy that, it's still early. I mean, this stuff's only a couple years old. It's like we could deploy it, but it's still getting better every
Yeah,
day.
it's very much in the
And
development phase. Yeah.
right. So it's like we deploy now, and then in a year we have to redeploy it. So, um, well, we don't need it yet, and we are looking at using it, but it's exciting, and so I've become the expert in that stuff while not using it at work, but will help one day when we decide let's cross that chasm. It won't be we're starting at square one while all these researchers and computer vision have gone way past what we're understanding at this point.
Yeah, and I get that's there a good point off that is kind of like maybe a good segue to having you break down some of the key technologies. And I got some stuff I can pull up that I think are good videos for beginners to understand these things. And I'll try to
Yeah.
like pause us and explain these things, and break them down in like a simple terms so you can follow along.
Yeah.
Um, but I have exact volumetric ellipsoid rendering or ever. We have Nerfs, which we talked about in a previous episode. We got 3D GS, which is 3D Gaussian splatting, Radiance fields, and then Gaussian splats, which are part of the 3D GS.
Mm.
And then there's obviously point cloud and all that is all involved in that as well, and photogrammetry. So if you want to talk about a few of those things, whichever you think are maybe like um, on top of your list, to maybe chat about. I know Ever is kind of like a new,
That's like the
like
latest.
the most latest and greatest.
If I would talk about this, and again, I guess I didn't preface my expertise at the start of this episode and I did an intro, but I'm not, I mean, people know me more as an expert in Nerfs and radiance fields. And for a while, my channel was called Mr. Nerf or the Nerf Guru. I
Mhm.
kind of renamed that as, so Nerfs, if we start there, there's this whole entire research called, um, novel view synthesis. So what we're doing in all these projects that just got mentioned is I'm taking what they call a sparse set of images. When I say sparse, we're only talking about like maybe a couple hundred.
Right.
And that doesn't sound like sparse because that's a lot of images, but think about how many different viewpoints you could look at a scene. It's like near infinite. So to say only 300, it's really not even close to the amount of viewpoints you can see. And so what they're doing is they're taking images and they're training it through different techniques to then be able to look at a scene and get a new viewpoint and try to preserve the accuracy of a novel view. So saying like, okay,
Mhm.
I don't know, I looked at a landscape directly on, and then I move over 20 feet to the right and look at it. It should look about the same in between from what it would really look like if I was out there. So um, like what you have on the screen here, I think, and this is Nerf Studio. So there's just these different utilizations to achieve that. And I like to think it was radiance field technology. So if you think of Nerf was kind of the first really big one that came out that has impacted this research line. It was Nvidia didn't create it, but Nvidia created instant Nerf, which is basically saying Nerf is a way of training a neural network off a set of images. And then when I want to then look at the scene, I'm querying their neural network and is ray tracing the image. So it takes a lot of compute resources, but you get these lifelike images. And Nvidia took it from taking 3 days to create one of these scenes to like 30 minutes or less. I mean, actually a few minutes if you have the right hardware. And
Right.
so that was really a big hurdle because no one wants to say, I'm gonna give this 200 images. I also have to have a $2,000 GPU, and I'm gonna wait 3 days to see if I get a result that works. It just was a little intangible for people. So
Yeah.
Instant Nerf came out. One of our computer vision engineers did a presentation on Nerfs of how they might help us fill in gaps in data. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to see if I can pick this up. And so I created a guide, and NVIDIA picked up my guide and put it on the internet and said, this is great. I already had it on YouTube, but they said, "Hey, can we make a technical blog on it?" And that just kind of somehow cemented me as the expert, as a non-scientist expert. And that's the thing. I could explain it. I have my face in the video, which everyone likes, that it's not just like unapproachable voices narrating. And
Yeah. I have a pill up
and
here if you want me to grab
yeah,
my
that was
screen.
kind of like what started all this. And so this is kind of I would say not an antiquated method. People aren't really using instant nerf anymore and neural radiance fields as much. They've moved towards what's called 3D Gaussian splatting, which is so that's really cool. So you can see how I'm like, that's a bridge I took 50 something pictures of, and I can move all around. It's not a 3D model in what you got on the screen there. That's actually like, it's kind of hard to think of it as like, see how it's like Swiss cheese that, but
Yeah.
it's not actually, it's just an optical illusion. And so like when you move around the scene, the reflectance of the water, all those things come through, but it's really looks like a solid scene. So I don't know if I turn it back in that video, but it it's pretty incredible. So there you go. Like the bottom of that bridge was all wet, and because it was wet, as you move, you can kind of see reflections. It doesn't look great. This was like 2022. It looks like lifelike now. I could take that same scene and it would probably look night and day different. But
Yeah. Even here is just so impressive what you were showing in this video.
which one was that? That's probably my tool bench in my garage here. Yeah,
Oh, this one?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's just there we go. See, that one looks a lot better. And as you move around, as it moves around, like the reflectance on my metal pegboards will change. You can see through the bags that are translucent. So you get this cool like lifelike property. And
Yeah,
um
I guess a cool point to bring up about this now that we've showed like a visual representation of it is kinda like how it works and like why it's better than a 3D model. Like,
yeah.
and from what I understand as a just so I can explain it as a newbie to newbies who might be watching this is that like you will capture some sort of video data or photo data and
Mhm.
give this to a NeRF, which is a neural network, which is learning these images, right, about this space. And
Mhm.
it's creating I guess, a point cloud of that. Is that part of what it does in terms of what this
That's
is? Is
okay.
this a point cloud?
So close to. So what you're looking at in that one video was a nerf. So there was no point cloud at all. So
Okay.
what it's doing is taking those images and it's encoding a scene into like it's called a neural network. And then and so you train the scene. That scene's on only a few megabytes when you're all done.
Right.
And there is no geometry. No, it's like nothing even exists until you look at it. Schroeder, you're a scat. It's like,
So
is the cat alive or dead? We don't know until you open the box. Well, we don't know what it looks like until I decide to what's called inference. I decide to then look into that neural network
Okay.
and say what direction I'm looking at. When it does that is using a ray tracer. So it's tracing these rays through this I think it was like I don't know if you know what an occupancy grid is, but imagine you took the world and you
Is that
pressed
this?
like a scene into a cube, and in the let's see here. Yeah, I don't know. But let's say you took the world, you compress it into a cube, or not the world, but like the scene, and then that cube is a bunch of tiny little blocks like Minecraft. And as you're tracing light through that scene, as it's colliding with the different Minecraft blocks, it's you starting to see them. And but those blocks are so tiny that they're like little pixels on the screen. So instead of, like, a couple thousand Minecraft blocks, you got millions of blocks. And so I don't know. So it's a weird way to explain how a Nerf works. And that's why it's kind of old because it takes a lot of GPU just to even look at a scene. Versus Gaussian splatting, which is the new version, which I think if you bring up like my getting started with 3D GS or something like that, I have some good examples. But with
Okay.
that, you're able to we're basically taking images, we're learning where those cameras are in 3D space. We're creating what's called a point cloud, which is a bunch of just
Yeah.
unique points. And then we're saying, okay, turn those points from a point and make them into an ellipsoid, which is actually more like a football shape. But that football shape could be more round, it could be really long and spiky. And then along with that, you're going to say, as I move and look at those little blobs at different angles, the colors can change. And so you get
Mhm.
this reflectance because depending on how I look at the scene, it can change the appearance. And so then you end up unlike a mesh where it's like you have a texture and you have a triangle network and you kind of build up these different layers. It's like
Yep.
you just have a bunch of blobs that are just one big illusion. and they're ordered on your screen in a way that when you look at them, it makes a lifelike scene. So
Yeah,
there's some
so
trade-offs.
I guess like the real pro is is model weight, right? So like if you build a 3D model of something, you have all these textures, you have this mesh, which is all of the lines that connect all these different points, and then you have the space in between those are faces. So the more points you have, the more lines you have, the more faces you have, the more dense that model is, and the bigger that data file is, which makes it much harder to compute, right? So what's great about Nerfs is that it's basically like you said, it's like non-existent. It's like this. It's like
Yeah.
magic. It really
So
is.
a nerf, it's a neural network. It's just like it's like a mathematical model that you look at. Gaussian Splats is actually like a point cloud type file that
Right.
gets rendered into. Just the great thing about them is they work a lot faster. I can use them on a phone. I don't need like a high end GPU because it's created in a way that's more like a 3D model that your game engine's used to rendering. So your GPU or even your iPhone GPU is made to look at that, right? And so it's taking all those, what it does, it takes all those points as blobs, as football blobs, and it calls rasterizes them. So basically it goes through these iterations where it projects them all into your screen from a viewpoint of when your image is and says, okay, how does that look like compared to the image as that's reference? And then it'll take those and it'll say, okay, well, some of these need to be cut in half, some of these need to go away, and it'll start to evolve the scene and make more or less of these blobs and overlap them in different ways until it recreates your scene as
So
close to as possible.
this sounds like ever, right? Here,
So
this is what
yeah, so like Ever is
I
kind of
brought up.
built on that. So like Ever is basically like 3D Gaussian splatting, but now you're adding ray tracing. So now you can get like all these ray tracing effects that you get. So you can start to put in like think of shadows and things casting off of these. You can
Right,
put
depth maps.
reflecting objects. Yep, and you can start to then mix assets. So you could scan some layers that are like your traditional meshes and throw them in a scene with 3D Gaussian splats and ray trace that whole scene and get this more realistic looking scene. So
I thought this was a pretty cool explanation of like
yeah,
3GS versus GT, and like it's called popping, right? Where it's getting
yeah.
stop and pop. Yeah, stop the pop. Yeah. So it's
So
got
like
this like weird like it's like not sure which is in front of the other type thing. And this is more mixing
yeah,
it
yeah.
too, right?
Things like as things will like overlap funny, think like some of these little blobs will, like pop in and out of the screen. And so then you kind of lose this realistic appearance. And with Evers, it doesn't do that. It's just the way they are able to render the screen. It's like that just can't even happen. So what's happening is this technology just keeps progressing, getting better, more lifelike. Um, there's no standardization of files yet, although there's a few that people are starting to use. So I think again, it's all really early. Starting to see apps being built on it. Um, works in VR, works in on desktop, on mobile. Um, but to me, it's like if I was to think like, what's the best use of this? Is to me is well, maybe I want to make a game environment or an animation or video or something like that, and I want to do a quick world building, right? It's like you can
Mhm.
spend all that time for either procedurally or manually making a world, or it's like, hey, I want it to look like this field out here in maybe you're in Oregon where I live, and there's a beautiful field. You could go capture that field, turn it into a Gaussian splat scene, pop it in an Unreal Engine, and then start putting your your
3D
meshes or
assets and
whatever
yeah,
assets you could green screen people in. And now it's like I didn't have to create this scene from
right.
scratch. It just
Yeah.
happened in like 45 minutes of processing.
This is this is a pretty cool thing that's happening in a few different companies. I think World Labs is one and Genie 2 is I think another
Mhm.
where they're making generative worlds. And I don't know exactly the technology behind what they're doing to make that, whether it's this or something different. But this sounds a lot like
Probably
that.
not. Yeah, so one interesting use case is I want to film at a specific rooftop at sunset. You got someone to go out there and capture the rooftop at sunset as a 3D Gaussian splat, put it on those projection screens in a virtual
Yeah.
projection studio, and now I got sunset for 5-6 hours or however long I need to get the scene filmed. And it's
Mhm.
not like, hey, the crew has to come back tomorrow because we didn't get all the, we only have 30 minutes of magic hour. Well, what if that 30 minutes was this a whole day event, and you wouldn't have to be on that time, you know, that
Yeah.
that
Well,
time compression.
I have an intimate experience with that, given I work in the film industry, and I've
Hmm.
seen this. They built the largest LED volume at Trilith Studios down in Georgia, which is where I lived. I lived down in Fayetteville, and we saw that kind of like really expanding right before the film strike, which happened like going on like a year and a half ago or so.
Hmm.
And then like AI happens. Like there's all this like rapid involvement of things that are affecting the film industry in exactly the way you're saying. So, we can recreate or go out and scan and have a whole database of cities and different parts of cities that someone can spin up. And because like right now they're just sending someone out with each Marvel film and they're like LiDAR scanning every
Yeah.
single scene for their movie for post, right? For VFX.
Hmm.
They had this really cool like box actually. It's called Scanny DeVito, and they it like expands out and it's got like 300 camera array inside of it, and the actors will walk in and it will scan them each day and have all this data. um
Hmm.
so yeah, it's like we're quickly, and as a person who does, I do location logistics, so like I find these locations and manage them and do all the logistics around it, and at some point I imagine this will kind of replace needing to go out on location, and it will probably be much cheaper, and maybe more versatile as well,
Yeah.
with like getting, like you said, getting your shots and having infinite shots at like at sunset or
Right.
blue
Yeah.
hour or golden hour.
Maybe the guys just, film scout goes somewhere and we're like, this is great. This is what we want. Then you could say, okay, send an intern out to go capture that scene every hour so you can have all the different lighting conditions possible. And then
Yeah,
you can even do nighttime. There's no reason you can't do a nighttime capture. And then it'd be like, all right, we got that scene. Now we could even do reshoots. Like maybe you capture that scene and then it's like maybe you did it live, but heck, we just need a backup just in case you reshoot a scene. You could go capture that scene really quickly in a matter of minutes, and then, if
yeah,
we need to get everyone back onto the like maybe somewhere where you had to shut down the scene. So to actually d get on location again is very expensive or not
exactly.
gonna happen. So,
Yeah,
um,
reshoots.
I'm not from that world, but I've talked to enough people to realize there is a lot of problems with locations, or at least dealing with, these real locations that can be tough to either come back to or shut
It's
down or
Yeah, it's extremely complex. Yeah, so like reshoots too is it gets more dangerous for like having to do reshoots coming
Mhm.
back months later. It's usually not like the next week. It's many months later during the editing process, and like they might not be available or something. So it gets really complex. And you know, uh, thinking back on what we were just talking about, I think at some point they won't even need to capture at every hour of the day. They just need to capture everything once, and then they could just change that and like
Yeah.
lighting and how it interacts in post. And maybe you can do that now already, right?
Yeah, there's already a lot of research on that, like the relighting of these scenes. Things like that are really
Pretty
easy.
cool.
Photogrammetry aren't necessarily quite ready yet, but are happening.
Mhm.
There's even ones where it's like you can go capture in a scene, and if there's things moving through the scene, it does a really good job of just like literally removing those and still recreating the scene without all these, moving cars or people, whatever it is. It's capturing in the wild because things aren't always static where you're at. So
Yeah, the control is another piece of that puzzle. We put a lot of effort into controlling locations, whether it's traffic or people, and it's a big manpower and it's a huge financial expenditure to
yeah.
just to get that alone. Yeah, so like this is it's certainly something that's very attractive to film studios and producers. Um,
And then like people outside of film, you know, the 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 classic problem with photogrammetry is you're representing the world in triangles. So things aren't triangle shaped always. Actually, as I'm looking around, I don't think there's a single triangle shaped thing in this room. Like things have curves, things have
Mhm.
very complex shapes. And so Gaussians again aren't perfect either. They're ellipsoid. So like how do you represent a straight line? We have to have a ton of really long spiky ones and they're not perfect. But then there's methods called like 3D convex splatting. So I'm saying, well, instead of using a football shaped object or like an orb, what if make it a convex shape so it can have straight edges, it can have many points, things like that. It can have curved edges. And now you're able to represent things really accurately that like you could never even get away with in using a triangle mesh. It's like you're kind of stuck with what you got. And so what it's doing is it's optimizing the scene to really just match the geometry of the scene with a bunch of different shapes that have curves and straight lines and different transparency effects and reflectance, that in the end you get this scene that you gotta look at and you're gonna say, I don't know the difference between the real video and the rendered video from 3D Gaussian splatting or some
Yeah.
derivative down the scene.
And this is all intimately tied into extended reality, and the achievability of these technologies is the ability to have really rich visual experiences that aren't extremely costly on the compute side of things, on the hardware.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's like, being able to do that, it's gonna that, convex ellipsoids, or is it, wait, convex what?
3D convex splatting.
3D convex splatting. Yeah. So it'll give us more
It,
um
but there's different
rich
versions. Yeah,
experiences.
it's like and I mean we're already seeing this in VR. We're seeing Varo. I don't know how to say their names correctly. Sorry if I said it wrong, but they've got Teleport now, which is like an app and viewing ecosystem. There's Gradio. I think is it Meta even has a demo of their version of it, which apparently is incredible. And so it's kind of like, hey, again, I want to transport someone somewhere. It's going to be a shortcut to, instead of building all this or trying to get some crazy volumetric capture method. It's like, hey, let's just throw someone out there with either a camera or you can use a SLAM scanner, 3D scanner, all these different methods now, and
Yeah,
create a VR environment.
yeah, it's pretty cool. We're seeing some like really interesting things happen in the space all at once, and it's really
Mhm.
fun to see what people are building with it, because you're getting this like core, just like concept, like the tech capability, and
Mhm.
people are just building all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah.
It's really fun what's going on in VR space specifically right now.
And then
Um,
the Geo Week conference just ended, which I wasn't at, but I spoke at 2 years in a row. And the 1 year I don't go, it's like 3DGS is on everyone's radar that this year. But the last couple years, I'm like, guys, you should be looking at this. And like, I don't get it. But they got it. And so they're realizing it's like, hey, I want to visualize like a multi-million dollar, you know, stadium build, or that's like $1 billion stadium builds now, where I want to, visualize things that photogrammetry just can't do. And now it's like, hey, we're going to make this visualization layer on it, but underneath it, you still have the geometry, so it's still all there. And so it's crossing into architecture, engineering, construction,
oh yeah, actually,
telecommunications, everywhere. It's actually very useful in visualizing complex locations as well.
I'm gonna name drop this guy who I just came across his company here, just on that note. I think they built something pretty cool. It's called Enviz. It's exactly what you were just saying. So they're taking, these architectural
Yep.
drawings, 3D, and they're laying it over your space, and you're able to walk through it. And this is obviously something that's like extremely powerful for um, real estate agents or builders, to have people walk through, and buyers, really builders, people who are building their own home, to be able to walk through this house build that they're gonna spend a ton of money on, and make sure that
Mhm.
they like it, and it's like, this is something that we have now at our use, as a tool. It's pretty
You
cool.
know, like early on too, with every point we were, we had an app that now it's just built into some other apps that uses the depth map from a pro iPhone or iPad and fuses it with images for photogrammetry. So let's say you're walking through a room like you just had on your screen. Walls don't turn out well in photogrammetry. There's nothing unique. It needs that to like know where that wall is in 3D space. It's not that it
Right.
ends up in like a big gap. And there's lots of surfaces like that, not just walls. What we do is we say, okay, well, I use photogrammetry as my first point for geometry, but where I don't have a good grasp on depth of the scene, I'm going to use the depth maps from that LiDAR to fill in all those blank spaces and get
Right.
these wonderful looking point clouds. And then we talk to people doing things like you're just showing, where they could use our API to capture something like a room or a house, and then they're bringing into things like SketchUp. So now it's like, hey, I don't have to go get an expensive scanner. I can just go walk around with an iPad or an iPhone, get a really complete scan of a room, and then bring it in a SketchUp, and then do like a remodel build out, and then be able to
Yeah.
reference what it looks like now, what it will look like in the future, and then clients can be much more on board. Because a lot of times it's someone out there who's just like literally taking photos and then hand modeling that scene and spending lots of time trying to replicate what they saw for maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah, this is like on that. It's like being able to have this and have a client walk through and just do live changes because they can just be like, I don't like that wood color. Let's try a different one. Like, cool, pick one from this, and they do it, and they can literally see it at scale in front of
Yeah.
them. I think that's just that's so
I
powerful.
think I think VR is cool. It's like I don't think people are necessarily gonna spend all day in a headset. It, there will be, but like a lot of people's jobs, like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna but it's like, hey, maybe 1 hour a day, I need the headset on, and it's gonna like solve a ton of problems, and then I can take it off. It's like I'm not always using all of my hardware I have out here in the office too, but when you need it, if you have the right hardware, it can just shortcut so much. So
Yeah, specific. I think maybe more so with AR pass through on VR headsets will be used.
yeah,
I
you'll
think
see a
at
lot more of that.
longer terms of time. Yeah, but fully immersive spaces maybe a little less. This is a good segue to get into something that you spoke to me about before, which was you were at a conference and you ran into some people that did some work for Boeing, and they were using QR codes to, I think, through either web AR or pass through AR on a headset to see the work that they needed to do on this fuselage while on the production line.
Yeah, I went to Augmented World Expo where they presented on it. It's called Boeing Augmented Reality Kit, ARC.
Okay.
And basically, I remember the details pretty well because it was my jaw was on the ground as they were talking about it. But this is again, this is the first conference I went to post COVID to give you an idea of when this was. So I mean, COVID wasn't even over. It was just they were starting to let people to get together in groups again. And so they were talking about when you build like a 737, one like Air Force One has like 250 miles of wiring inside the fuselage. A normal one has 50 miles. So either one has tons of wiring. And when you're putting that wiring into a fuselage, it has to go in one spot. It's not like you're building a house and an electrician comes in and says, "Okay, I need to run a wire down that wall and a wire up there." And it's like, okay, well, it's a little bit of jazz. They just got to improvise and get it where it goes. And of course, they make smart decisions, but it's not like that wire has one path it can take, or else the whole entire rest of the house can't be built. So what they were using was, I believe it was the Magic Leap one, which I wish I had on my desk right now because I have it. It's a brick now, but you basically put that on. They may have been using the HoloLens, so that's the one. I'm not exactly sure which one they're using, but they put it on. They had these little QR codes that were spatially anchored inside the fuselage. They would scan one and it would say, "Okay, I know where you are now in this fuselage," and then it would basically show the wiring schematics live on top of the work area. So they can then check to make sure their work is actually going exactly where it's supposed to be. Because I mean, it's expensive to backtrack as you're working on these. And in fact, I don't know if you've ever been to or have learned how like one of these airplane manufacturing plants work, but a Boeing 747 or what are they? I can't remember what the number of the planes are right now. But when they are on the assembly line, the assembly line is moving, I forget, like an inch an hour or something like that. And the plane never stops moving. So they start building it. And by the time it gets to the end of the assembly line, it's done. And so they can't afford to like stop that line. They have to keep it going and stay on track. So I thought it was like one of the most real world uses of a headset. And actually, now I think about it, I think it was on the HoloLens, not the Magic Leap, but it was quite an interesting way of using that headset.
Yeah, and I mean those are things that can be gone back to after the fact, right? For any sort of
Mhm.
maintenance guys. So like that's that layover isn't just useful for manufacturing; it's also useful for the maintenance side of things. And this is like, I mean, for construction, I know this was a huge part of Microsoft's HoloLens in the beginning was their use in the construction field, where you can literally go on site and look at your plans in phases, and then you can see where all the electrical work is. And this is great for like inspections, and if everything's lining up really right, it helps you
Mhm.
not have to waste a bunch of time like fixing things, because inspectors come in and they'll be like, nope, and you got to spend weeks fixing stuff that could have been done right the first time. So it's like awesome for that.
Eh, and you think about the price, people balked and still are balking at the price of Apple Vision Pro being, over $3,000, but when it comes down to solving problems, that's going to save you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars down the line. That's a very cheap line item. So,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily make sense if it's just like I'm not going to buy one for my kid
Right.
for
Consumer level.
industrial applications. And what happens is the more and more they build this, it's going to hopefully get cheaper. So eventually you'll have something Apple Vision Pro quality that my child can, it'll be cost the same amount as a PlayStation 5 or less. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit expensive for the consumers, but for commercial uses, yeah, it's amazing. But I think what
Mhm.
Apple had an issue, which was what Apple had an issue with was they just didn't have the apps yet. They didn't have like this
Yeah.
robust app market for like they couldn't convince like commercial places to invest into it, to use it like deeply into
Yeah.
their workforce.
Tell
And
you,
I think that
tell them. You don't have an
and it's
ecosystem.
like it's tough. Yeah, it's tough when you don't have like ecosystem, but it's like it's being built now. Like
Mhm.
Meta is unique. I've mentioned this in other videos. Like Meta has a unique position because they've been around for so long that
Yep.
people have built so much for them. And they built out the ability for creators to build inside. So they that's what I think Apple just needs to catch up on, and then we'll see this a huge expansion. I think for Apple Vision Pro, and then soon uh, AR glasses.
Yeah. Yep. I don't I got them right here. These are the first version, but these Meta smart glasses that they have, just I love them.
They're great.
Yeah, you have the newer ones. I just never bought the new ones because it was like I'm waiting. Now I gotta wait till the next ones come out at this point. But just
Yeah.
to be able to take photos, and now I'm starting to see like what yours can do. You can ask it questions about what you're seeing.
Hmm.
I could see
Yeah.
that in the industrial space. I mean, I'm
Right.
mounting machine learning, which haven't talked too much about, but eventually I'll be able to tell you how much is in a stockpile of rock that we measure with an iPhone by just looking at a single image. So there could be a day where we have a guy just walking around on a site and he's got a little camera embedded in his safety glasses, looks at a pile and says, how much is in that? Or how much have we made today of that? And it just tells him.
I
So,
think that is much closer than you might think, if
oh,
not
even
already
closer.
being worked
We are
on.
building that. So that, I mean, not necessarily those glasses, but we are building the ecosystem in which that can and will happen. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
the glasses, I think I mean, you're just talking about LiDAR really is the capacity to make that
Shoot.
happen at a small scale, right?
We don't even
And do you even need it?
we're thinking about putting sensors all over the site. So you got the site,
Ah,
you got machine spears going around,
yeah,
just
okay.
attaching the machines. You got cameras on poles, you got cameras on the buildings, and then you can just be 3D reconstructing the site continuously. And then you'd be basically just like
Just
querying your private network saying, hey, I need to know these things about the site condition right now. And it'll just say, okay,
yeah.
here all they are.
This is great. Yeah, this is like in the world of digital twins sort of, but like, yeah, like
Yeah.
live data on the 3D
And
space,
tell you
right?
how many times they just lose things on site. Or I mean, I've talked at a association of equipment management professionals. These guys are really intelligent and they know what they're doing and they're dealing with like a really complex, usually like construction site or work quarry, things like that. But
Mhm.
sometimes the most what you think is easiest thing is really hard for them to know. Like where is the impact hammer attachment for that dozer? And it's like, well, we last saw it at the site, but maybe they shipped it to another site and it's gen paper somewhere, or it didn't get entered in. So all some things just go missing. And so if you had like a camera system taking a picture of your site like every half hour, it could be like, okay, when's the last time we saw the impact hammer sitting around? You're like, oh, it's at
Yeah,
this site, sitting over in that
memory.
corner, like it's right
Yeah, like
there. So
live memory recall on
yeah.
any given anything at any time is
You'll see spot robots or rolling robots just like roll through the site every hour and take inventory of things for you.
yeah, we are not far off from that. I'm pretty excited,
Yeah.
to see stuff like that. I think that's cool. I think we talked about the camera thing. So, like, cameras on a pole, and this is, related to military applications,
No, well, no, we doing that already. So at
right?
our company, every point we just put in cameras on poles. But if you have two cameras, you can get you can get depth. You can 3D model something from just two images. If you know those images are in relation to each other, the whole scene can be 3D recreated really quick. And so what we do is we put like two of those out there, and then we're just have, let's say, like 3 or 4, we call them bins, basically just these blocks with stockpiles of rock and things like that, maybe slag from a steel manufacturing plant, And then we can every hour, every day, whenever on demand, they could just say, I need to know how much is in those. Those cameras just take a photo together, 3D model it, spit out a volume, and bam, there you go. And so it didn't require like sending someone out to go do that or relying more and more than anything, it's relying on that person to go out because they're busy, they're sick, things happen. Those cameras are just there. So
Yeah, yeah, that's great for especially for estimators and, like orderers, like to know like what's there and what's
mhm.
happening,
Oh
what
yeah.
needs to be what needs to
Yeah.
be ordered.
Salt. So we have DOTs doing salt
That salt's
management,
great.
right? And it's like,
Right,
hey,
yeah.
salt's upwards of $200 a ton. So it's really expensive. And so
Mhm.
they don't want they only get to order it. They order it usually at the head of the season, and then they need to replenish it as the season goes through. And they get like a couple times they get replenished each site in their contract agreement. Well, you want to wait until you don't have very much left, unless you see like a big storm forecast coming. But then you also want to know exactly how much you still then have left, so you can replenish as much of that as possible. So if you say like, oh, okay, we've used 500 tons of this and so let's order 500 more. Well, maybe you actually used 700 tons of it because you didn't have a good way of seeing how, I mean, 700 tons
Yeah.
is not an easy number just to eyeball when you look at giant
Yeah.
piles. So like
Yeah.
you could get it and realize, oh man, we used more than we thought. We could fit a lot more in this storage bunker. So, that
Yeah,
kind of
it's gonna
information is really helpful.
yeah, it's gonna get real interesting when they start combining stuff like that and like AR weather prediction stuff or AI weather prediction stuff. So like you can have like, hey, it's like auto ordering, and we're ordering based on we know like this storm's coming. It's gonna order this much because we're at this level of salt. It's like, and
Yeah.
it's having like a really efficient like just ordering and tracking system
And
based on
that's
like actual needs because you don't want to over
exactly what we
order
looked at.
and have like
Even
700 tons at the end of the year. It's like, why do we now? It's just sitting there.
yep.
You can be much more specific on the budget for the
And
needs.
there's also the inverse of I think I have enough to get through the weekend, or do we pay overtime for truckers to get more material in before this plant runs out? And so there's like all that games of logistics, all these things can be more planful when you have good data.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, data's king. Data helps you
So
make sound decisions.
and so like VR, AR, our clients aren't really using that. Like they're on a rock quarry. Well, it's not supposed
Yeah.
to use that. But like I'm seeing these glasses as being this is what's gonna end up at a quarry. And
Yeah.
it's gonna be integrated with safety lenses, and they're just gonna be able to ask. It's gonna
Yeah.
have smarts. They're gonna ask it. It's gonna probably have some sort of augmented reality overlay. Even at first, if it's just like a HUD, like a, think of like a fire pilot, and they have,
Mhm.
just a couple things on their screen. Maybe
Yeah.
that's all they need is like that
Yeah.
early readout, and then before we,
We have that. Yeah, there's a few models of that out there now.
yeah,
I don't know if they're specifically made for, like, PPE and construction rated material stuff, but, I know that there's certainly, like, some pretty lowbrow, like, AI plus some, HUD, like,
yeah,
green text, like, basically like the original Google Glass, but, smarter AI. But yeah, we're close to that, and Meta just dropped their Orion prototype, and it's like, extremely powerful already. So give it a few years, and Apple's gonna obviously compete with that, and maybe Google again. Who knows?
yeah,
So it'd be cool. Well, it'd be cool to see what 5 years brings for AR. I think AR is gonna be super massive in terms of revolutionizing the workplace and social. Like just being out in the world.
yeah. That's
Uh,
what I'm here for, just to provide the data to these things because that's what's gonna
they need it.
right. You need that
Yeah.
ecosystem. And that ecosystem needs an easy way to get scenes or data or all that, and that's what we're here building.
Yeah, it's part of the Holy Trinity. So
Yeah.
you have the hardware, and then you have the data crunching and packaging and depackaging and all of that back end stuff. And then you've got the creators who create the experiences that
Yeah.
kind of drive all that data. So yeah, it's cool that you work on that because it's very important. So I have a question.
Okay.
What piece of the XR tech stack do you think is the most critical to advance to ensure that we can scale XR to global daily use?
Uh, it can't mess up your hair. That sounds like a weird take. I have, like, hair I care about, but more importantly, just talking to my niece, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Check out this Apple Vision Pro." She's like, "I will never wear that." "Why not? It's really cool. You should check it out." No, because I spend a lot of time on this hair and makeup, and if I put that thing on, I can't see anyone for the rest of the day. Simple fact. So that's why I think these glasses that don't have all these straps is gonna be essential. Like the product
Another
design,
one.
I can't tell you how important that is. And I'll bring that up and people are like, people don't really care that much about their hair. I'm like, okay, typically the person saying that is not a
Is
woman.
is a
You know,
guy.
probably has spent time, like, so I don't wear makeup, and I don't want to generalize, but I know like a lot of women wear makeup, and just messing that up and leaving raccoon eye for an hour is not something that they're willing to do in the middle of the day. I don't want to do it, so I don't want to mess up this. I get that center strap thing, and then it's terrible. Then I have to wear a hat the rest of the day, which is not what I necessarily want to do. So just that whole like comfort in wearing it in a way that like doesn't mess up my appearance, it matters to a lot of people, more people than
Yeah, interesting.
people think about.
Yeah, that's an
If
interesting point. I've actually never heard anyone bring that up
we
ever
want to give
in
to
years.
everyone, yeah, it's
I
so
can't believe that no one's ever said. I've never heard of and there's a lot of females who make content about VR. So I've never once heard anyone say anything about not wanting to do VR because it'll mess up their. But it makes a lot of sense.
I've lived this life too, not wearing the headsets, but you put a hard hat on and it's got this lattice to keep it on your head, right? And you take
Mhm.
it off, your hair is just like it looked like
Yeah,
like trolls had that. And you can make their hair go like if your child is the '90s, you could have that hair that goes all crazy.
was.
Happens, and then I'm like, shoot, what do I do with this hair? You have to put a hat on it.
Yeah, and for like the makeup thing
Be
too.
your boss while you're like wearing a hat and nice clothes, and it just does not work.
Yeah, interesting. I maybe the ladies watching this who are like into extended reality, like leave a comment because
Yeah.
you get sweaty like when you put on a VR headset for more than like a few minutes. Like I can't imagine that that's very conducive with makeup. So good
Usually
point.
somewhat vain myself, but I also know that extends to my nieces and my daughters are too young that I want them to try headsets. They don't really care, but I'm like, if my high school niece won't wear this for that one fact, I don't think she does not seem like someone who is out of out of the ordinary child. I think that's pretty general sentiment as for a lot of kids and a lot of
Okay, so VR hardware makers, if you're watching this, you got to figure out a way to do VR that doesn't mess up your hair or your makeup. That's
and I've
feasible.
seen some interesting ones. What is the one I really like that wears glasses and they do it for like sorry, if you're hearing a lot of background noise, I have cats galore, but,
No, you're good.
they're
I'm
running
not.
all over the background. But it's the like, is it Tilt 5? Something like that, where you put the glasses on and you got the VR board and, j
Ah, I think I've seen
yeah.
this.
Those are really good, and again, they're just glasses. They're not like this fully immersive experience, but they are a group immersive
Ah, I
pass
see.
through.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Great. You can wear those and not leave looking like you've worn ski goggles and your hair's all messed up," and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. I'm actually like I'm all in on AR lightweight glasses. So like I'm not a big VR guy. I think it's good for a lot of things. It's great for a lot of things actually. They can both do things that the others can't, but I think AR is just has so many AR glasses has such a wide breadth of capabilities
Yeah.
that I think is more conducive with everyday life, like you're saying. Just you can take it on and off quick. It doesn't make you sweat. Doesn't strain your eyes as much. I don't think it will. And it's got so much capabilities comparable to like VR that I think it's
I
just
mean,
going to be the winner.
I was hooked the first time I wore the Magic Leap, and it was that robot one where they start coming out of the walls, and it's like your wall, not a VR wall, and it's just like, "Whoa,
I've
this
seen that.
this
Yeah.
is the future." Yeah, and,
Yeah. Like at home gaming, like you could just spawn up games, just LiDAR scan your room real quick. Boom. You've got like a laser tag game in your house.
yep,
Just
yeah,
VR,
and I've
VR
watched
or AR.
son yeah, I've watched my son run into a wall playing Madden, and it's like he was kinda over it as soon as that happened. So, like, that's
Yeah.
the VR. It's like you're still confined. Pastor or, "Oh, well, I haven't lost my complete senses."
Yeah.
But Apple's got that pretty well dialed in. I mean, that was on an older headset. I think that may have been like a that I
Quest.
mean, I think that may have been the Rift.
Oh, the Rift. That's going back.
So, yeah, I've had them all.
I have another question loaded up for you. Um, can you recall the moment that moved you onto your current path? Like you missed the bus and you met Jensen Wang. I think that's how you say his last name, CEO of Nvidia, and then he like offered you an internship or something crazy. You have a story that is recallable that might
Yeah.
have sparked
So,
your journey.
I started my career in GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems. It was
Mhm.
a great place to start. I'm a geography major. I was going to be a civil engineer and decided that's just not the life I wanted. And I spent good 5 years doing mapping. And this is mainly 2D mapping back in the day in 2007 to 2013. And my coworker pulled me over and said, "Hey, check out this company." And they had this video of this like airplane flying over Mount St. Helens, and then was taking these 2D images, and then out of the 2D images rose this 3D mountain. And I'm like, that's what I want to be. That's the space I want to be in, and that's the space I need to get to. And it wasn't, but 6 months later, I was working at that company. So, you know, it wasn't, and it was pure chance. It was pure chance. My study buddy in college had reached out and said, "Hey, I got an opportunity for you." And I thought he was still working at a different company, but I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely interested in what you have to say." And then he's like, "Yeah, I'm working for this company." I was like, "Oh, Every Point, which I'm working at." We were called something back then, or URC Ventures, but I was like, interesting. I had just watched maybe a month or two prior to that. I was like, whatever they told me, I was already in. And that set me on the path of where I'm at now. And that was it. It was like just knowing I needed to gather. I got lucky, but I'm sure I would have ended up somewhere around this anyways.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I'm looking forward to like my moment in the AR space like that, and it's awesome.
And
I love
I
hearing people.
jumped from government to, because I worked for the DOT, so I went from government to startup. So that's a big gamble. I had a 1 year old when I got hired like the week my 1 year old turned one. So it was a big gamble because I had, starting a family, but also
Mhm.
that's the time to do it because while you don't have a big family, hopefully you have other family around you in case things don't work out. But like now to make that shift with 3 kids and life hitting me in full force is much harder. So early
Yeah,
on, kind of if you want to go down this course, try to get there sooner than later because it's easier to pivot,
right.
easier to take less salary just to learn and get into it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at in my journey. I'm starting to like I think the technical some of the technical knowledge, like skills, and then like a lot of the knowledge to be able to
Mhm.
at least land a job somewhere, whatever position that might be, and work my way up. Because I know this is it. AR is my thing.
Yeah,
I could easily work in AI too. I
they
love
all
both.
overlap. They'll probably be the same company.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are extremely overlapping, especially like Meta. They're
yeah,
XR AI combined together.
yeah.
That is the future for AR. It's onboard AI and AR. That's really where I want to be at.
With Nvidia's DLSS 4, you can already see like they're rendering one out of every, I can't remember how many frames. It's stupid. It's like what, every 19th frame, whatever it is rendered that are actual frame renderings, and the rest of it is AI predicted frames. And so it's just AI is just turbocharging everything we're doing.
I have another question here. I don't know if we ever actually got into ever. Kind of.
Not really. It's just one,
It's
Ever is just like one of the different variations. I did talk about ray tracing. So every
yeah.
one of
Yeah, that's fair.
one of the like latest advancements that is the state of the art, and then tomorrow there'll be the next ever that will be more state of the art because that's where we're at right now. Like when you look at a lot of things, there's not a lot of breakthroughs in a lot of these like headsets. It's not like next month we have a 10x better headset, but that's what's still happening in Gaussian splatting and radiance fields and Nerf. It's just like, okay, that's great. Wait 2 weeks, there'll be a new paper that's a little better and a little better, and then you blink and it's 3 months later and it's all a lot
Yeah.
better. So
It's like it's the same thing with AI. They're both kind of doing the same thing.
yeah, exactly, they're on the same path, and they're also using AI in this. So it's kind of like, you know, one thing is enforcing the other.
I guess this is a good question. So for people that might be starting out in your field, is there any resources that you think they should know about to help accelerate their learning process? What's the sequence of learning they should take to experience the most seamless education process?
Okay, my field, working at a company that is doing computer vision. Um, there's a couple paths you can take. If you want to become an actual scientist, you want to become a computer vision scientist, you got to go get your PhD or you got to get a master's in computer science. There's no easy shortcut because it's very specialized. But if you want to like work in that industry and not necessarily like me, where I don't have a PhD, obviously, I came in and I'm good at taking this and putting it in application. I think a lot of it is there's a lot of resources out there, a lot of open source projects. Just start playing with it and maybe, build a showcase of what you can do and get curious with it. I mean, we like that. Like when we hire people, there's some things that, yeah, we like that they might need to know X, Y, and Z, but also like if they have a sheer curiosity for this technology and they're showing that, that they're building with it, it's like, well, that's what we need too. We need people who are curious about it and can showcase that. So, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's not necessarily one book or one thing because it moves so fast in computer vision, but there's just there's a lot of free resources out there in the open source community that, just learn how GitHub works. If you could if you can afford a computer that can run some of these projects, you don't need to do the top end stuff, but you can go start playing with it and learning and learning the lingo. That make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's okay to plug yourself too. I
Oh,
showed
yeah.
your YouTube channel. That's a good.
Anyone? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look at my stuff. My stuff's great. But I mean, and in our computer vision decoded, which is on our Every Point YouTube channel, that is a great resource.
And that's your
Just to like
podcast, yeah?
learn. Yeah, that's our podcast. We do a video and an audio version called Computer Vision Decoded. Those are all great resources. But like just self curiosity, you know.
Yeah,
And
and that's
Reddit forums, what actually some of them are toxic, but Discord, there's Discord channels. People will jump in and help you, and it's incredible.
and then on that note, Every Point is hiring,
We are
and
hiring.
here I'll
Please.
show on screen here. The future of spatial computing starts with every single point. Here's if you click here on Browse Open Rules, you can go down here and start expanding and checking out what they got available.
Yeah, we're looking for a web developer, mobile developer, and a product designer specifically. If you think you can do a combination of those, let me know. Reach out to me. Be happy to talk to you guys. We're really looking to scale what we currently have. So don't think you'd be coming in and building the next spatial computing app. It's like we have a suite of apps. We have a suite of solutions, and right now we're utilized in over 140 countries. We're on every continent. Yeah, we're in Antarctica, which is crazy, but
That's cool.
yeah, but there's a lot more we want to do to keep scaling that up and make it more useful to more and more people. And so, sometimes you just need more engineers and more help, and that's where we're at. We're trying to scale that up. We're trying to 10x the number of people that are touching our products every day.
That's great. So if you guys are looking for a job, you know where to look now.
Yeah, and
Do you have any pretty cool guy? I think that'd be pretty fun. And do you have any book recommendations or websites or
So I knew
software
this question
recommendations?
was coming. Okay, so again, maybe a different answer than everyone else gives, but I used to be a voracious reader when I traveled a lot. I had a lot of time to read on airplanes. Sometimes I'd read almost a whole book on a cross country flight, which was pretty fun. However, I don't have nearly much time. But the books I'm really into are the books that my kids are into, because if there's one way you want to connect with your child, if you can get ridiculously into the same book that they're into, it's really fun because then you can like read it together, read to them, let them read to you. It's a good way. If you only have so much time with your kids in the evening, reading is a good way to spend it. With my son being a little older now, we're starting to read the Andy Weir books. So we're that's The Martian, that's Hail Mary, those sort of books. So we're kind of getting into some of those really fun sci-fi books, and I've all read them, so it's fun to read them again and kind of riff on. It's like, oh man, I can't wait to get to this part. So that's what I like.
Yeah.
And then if you're in the business world and you want to start your own thing, um, there's a book I don't know what it's called now, but it's 4 Steps to the Epiphany, which is basically a roadmap for bootstrapping your own company and doing product-led growth by talking to your customers. Get out of your office, spend 0 time here, then all the time in their location, and it basically roadmaps how to like actually build a product people want to use. That's a really
I
good
see.
book. I can't
I
remember what
see
it's
that
called
this
nowadays.
this book has had a profound influence on you because I think this is a pretty distinct part of your bio and the way that you like to work with clients. You like to be in the mix. They're getting to know them, and I think specifically they've mentioned many times over is that we're surprised by how much you know about our company. We didn't think that you'd come and understand so much. and actually work with what we need, not what you think we might find cool, right?
Yeah.
So-
The lean startup is kind of an evolution on that same book too, which by Eric Ries, which is kind of like just saying the way it's like, hey, all the answers are not in your office. The answers are out there. Go spend time in your client's shoes. Get those boots muddy if that's what you're doing. But
Yeah.
again, like, how are you gonna learn that someone doesn't want to wear your headset because it messes up their hair unless you actually like sit down? So a lot of times they won't even think about that at the time they're giving you feedback unless they're sitting there and they put on their head and then they take it off and they're like, "Ah, my hair." They're like, "Ah, all right, hair."
The revelation moment.
So yeah.
You spend 8 years developing an XR headset, and then someone goes, "Ah, my hair," and you're like, "Ah, there goes 8 years."
This way. I wish it went this way. Yeah.
Start writing it down.
Sometimes, I mean, again, comfort doesn't. I mean, I get it. Like that center strap is usually the most comfortable, but I mean, how many times do people make choices that aren't the most comfortable because they look better?
Yeah, dude, I had this is a relic at this point. This is a Oculus Quest
Yeah.
2. But this was like the most comfortable headset I've ever had. This was like so well designed, and they made this nice little uh battery like mag pack
Yeah,
on the back as well.
because it like balanced the weight on your head, even though it's heavy overall. It's because it's balanced was better than the front load.
And they had these nice little pads here, which is like
Yeah.
this. They didn't have these in the beginning with headsets, so like all the pressure was on your forehead. And this really distributed some of that off to the top of your head there. If you're curious what this is, it's the Bobo VR M2 Pro. I think they make similar stuff for the newer headsets as well. If you're curious on that.
Mhm.
But yeah, man, that's all the questions that I had for you. I think we covered a lot of ground. It was really fun. It was really insightful. Thank you for sharing everything that you have and for coming on. And yeah, man, I look forward to following your journey and maybe having you back on for a subsequent podcast in the near future. See where
Yeah.
you're at.
Maybe you'll have one of our product designers we hired on here.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That's kind of like a huge driver for me for why I started this podcast is one to like educate people, but two, I want to build a community where and a podcast becomes very respected in terms of the quality of candidates and people that come on and talk,
Mhm.
and that I can then refer job opportunities to people through it. So like if someone reaches out to me, it's like, "Hey, you talk to a lot of people in this space. Do you know anyone that's good at this?" And be like, "Yeah." And I hope to be able to make something like a Discord at some point for the viewers where they're in there like helping each other and working on like some of this stuff. And like the people who are in there most, helping the people the most and putting out good
Yeah.
projects are the people I'll be like, yeah, if you like go right to this Discord and these are the people and you can, send them a job offer. That'd be really cool.
You asked what books or resources people should follow to like learn about the industry. To be honest, like just I believe in that whole entire thought of you're kind of like the sum of the parts of the people you're surrounded by. And so
Yeah.
I am fortunate that I get to work at a company that is we're not like, hey, you're in this silo, you're not allowed to talk to engineering. That's not how we've ever worked. I mean, not that I'm sitting here on chats with them all the time, but I am definitely around experts in several different domains in which I just keep learning from. So, like, if I don't understand something in computer vision, I can actually ask the question to an engineer or researcher. And our CEO, brilliant entrepreneur. I've gotten my master's in entrepreneurship from just his openness to how we built our company and opening up how this all works. And so just learning through all these people. And then now I spend a lot of time with other people who are posting things that are doing interesting things, calling them and asking them questions. Just, just because I don't work with them doesn't mean that people aren't willing to talk to you as well. If you see a project
Yeah.
that's interesting, reach out to the researcher. They'll be really excited if someone's interested in what they just spent perhaps a couple years of their life pouring all their, time into. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of like kind of my core attack is the people that I have on are the people that aren't really in the limelight. They're the people that are making things happen in the background that don't really get a lot of attention, that are kind of like the real superstars.
and maybe
Those are the people.
introverted, but they'll still like they will sometimes pull out of their introvertness just because you're excited about some minutia of their research, and they will get animated.
Yeah, I'm fortunately someone who's like, infinitely curious, and I find the minutiae stuff really interesting. And so, like, I've noticed like a really really awesome supportive group of people. Like, I have had, I don't think one person I've reached out to yet. And I was like, hey, you want to talk about this thing? They're like, yeah. Not one has said no. Like, they are like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Like, I love the chat. I think people love to just talk to other people, and people like to share things that they're working on. So that's the other reason I love doing this. It's pretty cool. Get to talk to cool people like yourself. So
Definitely.
yeah, again, thanks for coming on, man.